All right, good morning, everybody. You are all coming into the webinar right now. It's going to take a moment for people to file through, so we're just going to be on mute for a few moments here, and then we'll get started. All right, and it looks like everybody has gotten into the room. We still have a few trickling in, so just 30 more seconds and we'll kick off. All right. Thank you all for calling in today. I'm Chris Boyd, the head of marketing at Career Partners International. So first of all, it's our sincere hope that you're all staying safe throughout this pandemic. We appreciate you joining us today. At CPI, we have over 50 partners in over 250 offices around the world. We've directly seen the impact of COVID-19, and we realize that it has changed the way that you and your teams are doing work. We're hosting these webinars and posting as much information as we can to try to help get everybody through it. So with that said, let's jump into a little bit of housekeeping. So we're hosting this webinar on Zoom. So first of all, thank you to Zoom. They've been doing a lot of fantastic stuff throughout this pandemic. But there are over 100 people on this call. So that Q&A panel at the bottom of the page is going to be your best friend. You're all on mute, but if you have questions throughout the recording, please feel free to ask. We want to hear from you and make sure that we're addressing any of them. That said, there are over 100 people on the call, so we may not get to every single question. We're also going to be running a poll, and we're also going to be asking questions throughout the call, so feel free to answer those in the chat or Q&A panel as well. So this call is going to be recorded, and we will send each of you a copy of this later today. So with that said, joining us today from London, Ontario is Terry Gillis. Terry brings to the table over 20 years of experience in the talent management industry. He's CEO of our CPI member firm, ARIA Consulting, and he's the chairman of the board at Career Partners International. So Terry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks very much, Chris, for that introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I know these are just incredibly unusual times that we're in. You know, I was speaking to somebody earlier this morning, and I was having a conversation about some business planning that they're going through, and I said to them, "Can you imagine if I told you 3 weeks ago we'd be having this conversation?" I mean, in a short period of time, we have come into a crisis that's just unprecedented. So it's very interesting times indeed, and our hope here at Career Partners International, and I can speak for our partners across the globe, is to be completely relevant and helpful to each and every single person, every individual, every employee, and of course all our organizations that entrust us on a day-to-day basis. We're here to support your organizations and support your people. That's what we do. So hopefully today we'll be able to provide you some great insights into leadership in difficult times. These are difficult times, and difficult times always, of course, require good leadership. So I'm sure many of you have heard this. I always like to start off by saying, never waste a crisis. Been actually doing a little bit of research to find out the exact where that came from. Some are saying it was Rahm Emanuel from Obama's tenure, but I could even trace it back further to Winston Churchill. I don't know if anybody does. Please put it in the comments, let us know. But it's a great quote, never waste a crisis. This presentation actually that I'm doing now, believe it or not, we brought this out in our local firm here, ARIA, and to contextualize for everybody around the world, I'm in a little town called London, not the one across the pond, and shout out to our partner Lynn Hardman over in the UK, but this is in Canada, right between right between Toronto and Detroit, just to contextualize that for you. So back in 2008, 2009, the last time we saw an economic crisis of magnitude, we brought this presentation forward. We brushed it off a little bit for you today to bring it up to speed, but the context behind it really was never waste a crisis. For those of you out there may have been following me on social media, and if you haven't, a little self-serving plug here, check out Terry Talks. They're available on our website, area.ca. A couple weeks ago, just as this was starting to unravel, starting to come into being, I did a quick little Terry Talk and I said, what is the opportunity in this crisis? And when you flip that thinking around, it kind of contextualizes things a little bit differently for you. So I'm starting off today with never waste a crisis and focusing rather than the negative, which we'll talk about in a minute, but what's the opportunity in this? What's the opportunity in this for all of us? And I think when we start to change that focus, it can change our direction a little bit. The reality is of any crisis, I got this yesterday from my financial advisor, which I thought was pretty interesting. He said, rational thinking prevails in times of calm. And I would argue that up until a couple weeks ago, I'd say most of us were probably thinking rationally about things. However, emotional thinking prevails in times of panic. And I'd argue there's sort of two sides to a crisis, two phases, if you will, of crisis leadership. The first one is one that I think we've probably all gone through in the last couple of weeks, and that is the emergency phase. That's the phase where, it's just been chaos. It's been focusing on stabilization of our organizations. It's about trying to buy a little bit of time so they're making better decisions. And then we transition from that phase into the adaptive phase. And I think many of us are maybe starting to get there now. There was a big push 2 weeks ago, get to virtual teams, get everybody off site, get everybody in their homes, working from home, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're starting to get into that stabilization phase or adaptive phase, if you will. The problem, of course, is our little friend here, panic and fear can take over. That can take root and that can derail all of our abilities to try and get to stabilization. And it kind of brings up another concept that sometimes gets in the way. So as leaders, I think we need to be on the lookout for this. I think as leaders, we need to be mindful that this could be existing inside our organization. And that's a little thing called learned helplessness. For those of you who are psychology people or have had the privilege of studying one of the great sciences called psychology major, have to put a plug in. You'll remember the story of Seligman's dogs and the learned helplessness of dogs that were getting electrical shocks in cages back in the 60s. There's a lot of really cool psychology experiments in the 60s. And what it tells us is that we can become so fearful and so entrenched in our fear that we simply can't move forward. So as leaders, we need to be on the lookout for that in our teams and our employees right now that may be suffering through a tremendous amount of fear. More on that in a second. So what's going on? Well, right now, here's the facts. Chaos is everywhere. Chaos abounds right now. So we're going to do a quick poll, I believe, Chris, and got a great team here helping me out. So they're in the other parts of the world. I'm here in London. So a quick poll. What's the status in your organizations right now? We'd really like to know that. So is it we're still not sure what to do? We really haven't done much. Is it more of we're figuring it out day to day, kind of adjusting on the fly, calling audibles on the field, if it were? We're holding on, but we're not really sure what the next steps are. Maybe we've made some early adjustments, but we're really not sure. Or is it we've made some initial changes? Maybe some of you have moved to layoffs, but more options available as needed. So if we could take a quick moment. Chris, I'm going to let you handle this one, I believe, and let us know what's going on. And we're curious to see what's going on there so that we can get a feel for things. That'd be great.
Yep, we'll leave this open for a few more seconds. Numbers
Awesome.
are rolling in.
All right, perfect.
And then once the poll is complete, everybody will be able to see the results as well.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
All right, we're slowing down. Let's just give it 10 more seconds here. right, so just over half have responded, so we're going to close the poll here.
I assume we're going to get to see those results, Chris.
And here are the results.
Awesome. So, not surprising. Most of us are figuring it out day to day, adjusting on the fly. I like to say, I'm a football fan, so that's calling an audible on the field. A lot of us doing that. So the good news is absolutely zero on still not sure what to do. So maybe that's because there was no changes, or maybe it was because still not sure what to do. So we're actually taking some action right now. That's just kind of interesting. So interesting results. Not at all surprising that we're still trying to figure it out day to day, which is pretty common in crises, quite frankly, that we see that. So that's a challenge that you're facing inside your organizations, and also a challenge that you're facing, your leaders are facing, your employees are facing. So we're going to pick up on that a little bit as we move forward. So thank you, Chris, for that. So can I go ahead and close that? There we go. Awesome. All right. So, so leading through transition effectively, I believe the following, and that is, first, you have to start with yourself. In previous iterations, I've actually used the analogy of being on an airplane, which is sort of a foreign concept for many of us right now. But when you're on a safety demonstration airplane and they talk to you about that oxygen mask, they always tell you, put it on yourself first. And the reason they tell you that is because if the oxygen, or the plane depressurizes and there's no oxygen, you're completely useless to anybody else if you haven't taken care of yourself first. It's actually counterintuitive to think as a leader you should take care of yourself first. As an individual on an airplane that's depressurized, take care of yourself first. But you should, because by taking care of yourself first, you're able to help others, and that's the critical piece. So what I'm going to talk about is, what are some of the things that we should start doing as leaders? What are some of the things we should stop doing as leaders? And then, of course, what should we continue to do as leaders? And then when we've got that, then we're able to support others. So there's a little bit of homework I think we all have to do as leaders, or start thinking about as leaders, in order for us to ramp up our effectiveness in a time of crisis like this. So let's dive in and let's take a look at what I think we should be starting to do. And at any time during this presentation you have comments or whatever, let's dump those into the chat box so that we can keep track of those. That would be fantastic. So the first thing that I think we should start, two things we need to start with, and that is, what is the plan? And then where are you focusing your mental energies? So with respect to a plan, and we'll probably do a quick poll here after I get through these points, Chris, and that is, I think a great plan is, what are the 3 goals that you have for today, or what are the 3 goals you have for a week? And then we won't get into a protracted debate about goal setting, but one of the things we do know about goal setting is that if you have a list of goals the length of your arm, you never get through it. But if you can break that down into smaller pieces, or into smaller amounts, maximum 3, you usually find you get through them a little bit better, because you're not completely distracted, looking all over the place for what goal should I be focused on. So focus becomes important. What are the 3 goals you have for today, or what are the 3 goals that you have for the week? Then communicate that plan. Are you communicating that plan? We'll talk more about communication in a second. It becomes really, really critical. And then, of course, ask for help. This, unlike any other time, I believe, is a critical time for leaders to reach out and ask for help. Don't get burned out, because there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot on all of our collective plates. And this is not a time to be stoic. This is a time to reach out and get the help that you may need. Just a person to talk to. And that's where a lot of our coaching practices across the globe can be very, very helpful, because it's a person that you can reach out to and say, hey, listen, I'm struggling a little bit. I need to bounce some ideas off somebody. Get the help. Don't let it fester inside. You'll get burned out. And then, like that oxygen mask, if you haven't put it on, you're not going to be particularly helpful for many people. So I believe 3 goals. What are they? Day, week, whatever works best for you. Communicate that plan and ask for help. Don't get burned out. So Chris, let's just see what's going on with the folks on the chat today with respect to how many people currently have a plan. Curious to see that. So can we throw that one up there?
Yes, the poll is open now.
Perfect. let me know because I don't see it.
Yep. Everybody should see the poll. You should be able to respond now. And it looks like we're having a technical issue. One moment.
Okay.
Let's try one more time before we bail on that.
All right. Because I'm not seeing it at my end. There we go.
Here we go. Everybody seeing it? Should be open again, and we're getting responses.
There we go. We're off and running.
All right, team. We'll keep it open for about 15 more seconds here.
Thank you.
All right, we have 53% of respondents and closing the poll.
Awesome.
Here are the results.
Don't see them.
How about now?
Still no.
Well, it's a simple question. So do you
so
currently have a plan developed? Yes,
yes.
It's 69%.
Awesome.
And no is 31%.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so 2/3. So 2/3 pretty good numbers. That's excellent. So it's good. That's a good start. So hopefully by the end of the session today, we'll get that the numbers up to closer to 100. Hopefully. So great. Thank you for sharing, everybody. That's really interesting and encouraging. So here's where I think we get caught sometimes, and I don't know exactly who to reference on this one. This has been sitting around in my inbox for years and years and years. Somebody out there may know exactly who to give full kudos to on this one. I don't anymore because it's just been over the years. The reference has been I've lost track of it. So, but this is a great 2x2 matrix, and I teach business school, and I always tease my students. I always say, whenever you got a business problem, present it in the 2x2 matrix. You can solve most business problems this way, and I think you can here too. If we look on the y-axis or traditional y-axis, or the left-hand side, you're going to see what are you thinking about, what are you not thinking about, and then of course the columns are what you can't control and what you can't control, cannot control. So where do we focus our mental energies? So if we're focusing our mental energies on constructive problem solving and opportunity thinking, that's when you're thinking about things you can't control. This is where we should be focusing our energies right now, things that are in our control. Sadly, a lot of us spend our time over on the other box, where we're thinking an awful lot about the things that we cannot control, which is really endless worrying. I mean, I pick on my mother here, but my mother spends every single day worried sick about the weather that she has absolutely no control over. She spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about that. And it just ends up causing her a tremendous amount of angst. So probably not a good place to be. Now, if we're not thinking about things that we have control, well, that's missed opportunities, or maybe it's living in a fantasy world, or maybe it's a bit of denial. But what a missed opportunity if we're not thinking about those things that we can't control. And then, of course, if we're not thinking about the things that we have absolutely no control over, well, then that's a great conservation of energy. And really, it's a great understanding of the reality that we find ourselves in. So that's good. So what we're trying to do is move everybody up into that thinking about the things that you can control. So regaining a sense of control. Did we put a poll question in here, Chris? Can't remember.
This is an open question.
Open question. So will you be able to grab some responses?
Absolutely. So if you guys type your responses into the chat menu, I will be able to read them as we go.
Yeah, so the question is, what are some of the things that we can control, or what are some of the things we can't control right now? But let's focus more on the can't control side of things right now. So what are some of the things that we can't control, and therefore can be focusing or thinking about, and therefore focusing our mental energies? Any responses coming into that, Chris?
Yeah, so things we can control. My attitude,
Very
unnecessary
good.
spending. And I will keep these anonymous, guys, so feel free to share as you like.
There you go. Thank you.
Communicating our plan,
Excellent.
wellness, creating
Absolutely.
learning modules, a daily
Right.
schedule, our business contacts, maintaining those.
Very good. Yes, indeed.
Keep social distancing, maintain your own personal health.
Yes.
Stay
Very
positive.
important. Yeah. All right. Anybody gone to the can't control, just out of curiosity? Anybody throwing any cannot control?
Cannot control pandemic results.
Absolutely.
Others' behavior.
Right.
My
Okay.
food intake could fall on either side.
Yeah, I think that some of us are going to come out of this social distancing and self-isolation looking a little different. So,
Can control. I love this one. Create more content.
absolutely, absolutely. This is good. So, a great exercise that I actually took our team through here as well, just to be getting them focused on, okay, there's some things out there that we can't control. Let's not get ourselves, sucked into that. Let's focus on the things we can control. Many similar kinds of ideas that we shared here today. That's awesome. Thank you for that. So a lot of noise on this slide and sort of goes against everything I believe in with respect to slide decks, which is keep it minimalistic, but nonetheless, a lot of information at the same point in time I think is relevant. And really what I'm trying to focus on here, and I think most of us know this, is we know from many, many, many studies that well-being and resilience really comes from that internal sense of control. That's a belief that you control your own destiny, you control and shape your life, and that leads to better coping and confidence, and confidence breeds confidence. So what are some of the things that if you have an internal sense of control, you're thinking things like, I have choices, or I can take action, or I can do something about some things, or I expect outcomes based on what I put out or what my efforts are. If you're more at the mercy of external forces, if you're more of an external control, which is like fate, or other powerful influences, or zodiac signs as an example, typically it's seen as being more weak, or completely, again, that learned helplessness perhaps comes into play. And what we know about that is you get greater stress. So things like, this is my fault, I should have been better prepared, I should have had a pandemic plan, who saw this coming, or I can't, or it's impossible, or this is bad luck, or if only we had done a better job of planning. So, but here's the great news, and this is applicable for all of us on this call. It's also applicable for all of us, those that we may be leading that aren't part of this call. And the good news is that we can change that center of control. It is a learned behavior, and it comes from our self-talk and how we change our self-talk. Because what we know is our beliefs control our thoughts, and our thoughts control our feelings, and our feelings in turn control our actions. And if we shift the self-talk, then I think we've got this. I think that if we shift the self-talk, it's the old story from when I was a kid, the little engine that could. I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I know I can. When you make that shift over to positive, I've got this kind of thinking, then you know what? We're going to get through this, because not much has really changed except our external world. We still have the same skills. We still have the same abilities. We still have the same competencies, the same experience, the same knowledge. That hasn't fundamentally changed. Yes, as leaders, maybe you're being asked to display those differently, or tap into those differently, or utilize those differently, but the DNA is still there. Those core competencies, those core rudimentary DNA facts about you as a leader, and of all of our employees, hasn't fundamentally changed. So we've got this thing. We just got to change it up a little bit. So our beliefs control our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. So what do we need to stop doing? I think there's a lot of things that we can stop doing. And this was sort of a cathartic moment for me in the last couple of weeks, because I got to be honest, when Friday the 13th, which will probably go down in history as one of the worst Friday the 13th ever, when everything seemed to just become unraveled. Here where we are, it was the start of the school system's March break. The premier of our province came out and said, it's, we're going to be shutting down the schools for 2 weeks post March break. That was unprecedented. That really sent shockwaves. Very shortly thereafter, we were into a state of emergency, and it just went downhill really, really quickly. But I'll never forget that first week, that week of March the 16th, rolling into St. Patrick's Day. And I was consumed with news. I was every news channel I could possibly find. I was into and following. So I suddenly said, you know what? I have that's enough. I think I turned off the news. I think there's three things you should stop doing. I think you should turn off the news, because what news does is it just makes us crave, and a crisis like this, uncertainty makes us crave information. So now we're out there, we're looking for news. We're voracious appetite for bringing in as much news as we possibly can. But really, what we know is that the consumption of negative news causes stress and distraction, and we can't control it. So when we are checking in on news feeds constantly, guess what? All that click through and AI and all that stuff, when you're on your phone and you're clicking through, it's tracking what you're clicking. When you're on your computer and you're clicking through a news, it's tracking what you're clicking. Guess what gets into your feeds? You're in your social medias, you're in your LinkedIn, you're in your Facebooks, you're in your Instagrams, or wherever you are. It says, hey, this person really likes negative. Let's send them more negative stuff. So I say, change that ratio. Change the ratio. Start looking for empowering solution focused news. It's out there. Celebrate the successes as we go through this. The 103-year-old lady in China who beat COVID-19. It's amazing. Let's celebrate that. Or the fact that, there's clinical trials that are in place that are been accelerated at an exponential pace. Let's celebrate that. Or the fact that, the great work, the big one right now that just unbelievably heartwarming is the plane load of medical people that are on their way to New York to help with the absolute crisis that is emerging there. Let's celebrate that. That's incredibly powerful news. And then the other one on here, which is cancel the noise. It's like noise canceling headphones, right? Do some noise cancellation. For some of us, that might be meditation. For some of us, it might be just turning on some great music. For some of us, it might be just going for a walk away from others, socially distanced. But nonetheless, incredibly powerful moment just to turn off the news, cancel the noise, change the ratio. I think those are three fantastic things that we can all start to do, or stop listening to the negative news. We all know the impact of negative news. When we hear negative news, it becomes a stressor. There's a great study, I can't remember exactly who it was that did this one, but they took two groups of people. They took one group and they exposed them to negative news in the morning, and they took another group and exposed them to sort of not saccharinely sweet news about unicorns and lollipops, but it was just sort of more of a generic solutions kind of news. They gave those two groups. At the end of the day, they basically asked them, hey, how did your day go? And what they found was over close to 30% of those that had seen the negative news reported having a terrible negative day. So if you start your day tuned into the news channels right now, I'm going to guess that your day is probably going to get a lot of energy sucked out of it. Let's avoid that. The other one too that we know is the impact of optimism. Again, our good friend Seligman did some work with insurance salespeople back in, I think it was around the early 80s. And what they found was that those people who were more optimistic actually outsold their pessimistic counterparts by a whopping 37%. So our own psychology has a tremendous impact on how we operate in the world. So stop the negative news, turn that off. Let's get that out of our lives. That doesn't mean we become ignorant. That doesn't mean we become, completely disassociated from what's going on. But let's just not lap it up in massive amounts. It just brings us down. So
Terry,
yeah.
Two good bits of input from the attendees out here.
Yeah.
So we do have a former news journalist who is confirming that yes, 24-hour news cycle, they do purposely emphasize the negative.
Yes.
And then another wonderful bit of insight from another attendee is our response to an experience is more important than the experience itself.
Very, very good. Very good. It's interesting. I remember reading years ago about, and someone, again, probably a whole lot smarter than I am, probably has the exact reference for this. But when you look at all the emotional words, at least in the English language, I suspect it translates across many different languages. But when you look at the emotional words in the English language, close to 2/3 of them have a negative connotation. So it's almost like human beings are negatively hardwired, which is probably why our news person out there is saying that's why 24/7 hour news channels knows what turns our buttons, which is kind of sad. But let's get rid of that, 2/3, and let's focus on that 1/3. I think that would be really, really helpful going forward. Thanks for that share. That's fantastic. So the other thing that I think a lot of us are facing right now is fear, and trying to mitigate fear. Of course, being courageous as a leader doesn't mean the absence of fear. And being a leader certainly doesn't mean you just kind of boldly charge ahead in blind faith. Absolutely not. But it does mean that I think we have to contain our fear and try to mitigate our fear as leaders, because people are looking to us, and your teams out there need to believe you're in control and you have the confidence to make the right decisions. It goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, and that is, in terms of who we are, our fundamental composition of skills and abilities and whatnot hasn't changed. It's still there. Yes, we're being challenged like perhaps we've never been challenged before, but we have the capability to work our way through this. And I think that's what our employees and that's what people are looking for from their leaders today. And some are doing a better job than others, no question. But they want to know that fear is not consuming you, and that you have hope, and that there is hope out there. I think those are very powerful things for leaders to be doing. So what are some of the things we can continue to be doing? Well, leaders are, leaders for a reason. And one of them is because they're probably pretty good at making decisions. Decision making is probably part of your calling card. So in that context, a couple of comments. One is, let's try not to overreact. There's lots of things that we're going to need to do over the weeks and months ahead. But as always, we should try to make our decisions based on facts, on data, on deliberation, on discussion with others, with experts, and not in reaction to a headline or, dare I say, a tweet out there. So how does one make good decisions? The best way to resist the siren call of action is to slow down. Panic makes people make really, really bad decisions. When we get into panic mode, I remember reading this in the context of Crucial Conversations, and it was such a powerful image. When we're threatened with something, as humans, we're biological creatures. We get into flight or fight mode. Everybody knows this. And what's interesting about flight or fight mode is that all that beautiful, rich, oxygenated blood that normally resides up in the brain, that makes us think clearly, suddenly gets drained. It's like someone pulled a plug, like a drain plug, because all of that rich oxygenated blood goes to the muscle systems, because the body's saying, red alert, we're either putting up our dukes and we're going at it, or we're hightailing it out of here. Either way, we need all the energy we can. So guess what stalls? Our brains. So at a time of complete sheer panic, we become about, and I think this is stealing directly from Crucial Conversations, we have about as much mental capacity as a rhesus monkey. So let that one sink in for a minute. I'm not trying to be insulting to anybody, but that is our reality. When we are panicked, we turn into really not smart people. So when you're in panic mode, not a great time to make decisions, because you're probably going to find you're making bad decisions because you just don't have good fuel upstairs. So we know that panic makes us want to deal with it in the moment. But most actions we need to take right now, needs to be prudent, needs to be thought out, and we have the time. So this is a slowly developing pandemic. This is not something that, like a market crash or 9/11 or something, where it happens suddenly and it's suddenly, days or weeks later, it's suddenly back. This is a long drawn out process. So we've got time. So best to take our time right now to make decisions that are smart, based on information rather than acting on our gut feelings right now. So that's sort of how I see things. Hopefully you see it the same way. Slow down, take our time, because we've got a little bit of time to deal with this. As always, I think the key to all great leadership is to focus on your people. Your people need you. I always say in times of crisis, re-recruit your people. What does that mean? Tell them people that you need them, that you want them, that they're important to your organization. Make them feel that they are important. Keep those people engaged. As we all move out into virtual reality or virtual connectivity, working from home, where our home offices, we don't have the benefit of walking up and down the hallways of our offices for that quick check-in, or saying hello to a colleague at the water cooler, or checking in with somebody as they're stressed out about something and you can point that out. We don't get that line of sight now. So doubly important to be checking in with our people. Even if you're faced with the tough decisions of potentially a leave of absence or a layoff, let your people know that despite those tough decisions, that they are still critical to the business, that it's not about them, it's about the situation. So with anything, when we're focusing on our people, communication is key, obviously. So we know that we may not have the answers to everything, but in crisis communication, communicate early, communicate often. That's the mantra of anybody who's in crisis communication field. They'll tell you early, often communication. So we're still trying to understand the extent of this problem. So we don't fully understand the ramifications. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, and that's okay. So be open and be honest and be transparent. I think that just makes you more real and authentic as a leader, and being transparent as you possibly can. Yes, sometimes we're going to get it right, and sometimes we're going to get it wrong. And when we look back on this, we're probably going to say, how is it possible that I made that decision in the moment? Because that was the right decision to be made in the moment. Some of you out there may know IPEC. It's a coaching certification. My wife and I went through it about a year ago. And one of the most controversial things they taught us in that coaching program was there's no such thing as a mistake. We had a very, you can imagine, lively debate about that in the session. But the context or the perspective about it was, which I thought was really fascinating, was mistakes are not mistakes unless you purposefully make them, because most of us make decisions in the moment based on the information we have in the moment. Hindsight's always 20/20. And so we can always look back and say that was a mistake, but in the moment it wasn't. Hence their argument that there are no mistakes. Maybe a little bit, idealistic for some of you, but I love that perspective, is make the best decisions you can in the moment, be open, honest, and transparent with your people. It'll serve you well, we believe. So good communication, post information. How are you now migrating? For some of us, it's work from home. For some of us, we may still be in our manufacturing facilities. Maybe we have some people that are healthcare providers who have to be at work. Communication, email, company intranet, Slack, Facebook channels, whatever those mechanisms are, use them, and use them plentifully. Use them a lot. I think that we cannot over communicate right now. I think describing how we make decisions, how they were made, what issues were brought into play. I think travel's a pretty easy one now because people saw that, but the outbreak of this pandemic, people were scratching their heads about that. How were decisions made about working from home? How were decisions made about how we're going to support people from working from home? How do we make decisions about, we need to call you in and we need you to be physically on site in our facility? How were those decisions made? Communicating no less than every single day, especially if you got work from home people. That should be multifaceted. It's amazing what crises will do. We have been talking in our firm about using Microsoft Teams to communicate with one another. We finally implemented it, and holy cow, it's really not that hard to utilize. But in my mind, I had built it up as this big implementation that was going to distract us. Now we're checking in constantly with each other. It's a fantastic tool. Not to give a plug to any particular one tool. I'm sure there's others out there like Zoom, for example, we're using right now. Very helpful. And then of course, providing information in a timely manner. Even if you don't know the answers, let them know. I don't know the answer to that, but we'll get back to you. This is good old fashioned communication business leadership 101. I'm sure I'm not saying anything that's new or unknown to anybody. I don't know where I got these quotes from, but I love them. So if somebody knows the reference, I'm not claiming ownership to these, and I just love them so much. And then I totally lost the context for it. So apologies to the author out there who I'm gracious to emulate here. So I love this one. I'm giving you today's truth. It may change tomorrow. I love that quote. I love this is what I know is changing. This is what I know is not changing. I love that. Or I'm giving you all the information I have. I don't know anything else. Or we're all going through the same change. It's important that we stick together. Some great communication. So keep communicating becomes the mantra, if you will, of good leadership in critical, difficult times. As C. North Parkinson said, and I love this quote: "The void created by the failure to communicate is soon filled by poison, drivel, and misrepresentation." So, it's nature abhors a vacuum. And if there's a vacuum, oh boy, it'll fill in. In fact, aren't we seeing that now? Nature's sort of taking over our cities. I saw a clip yesterday from in the east coast of Canada in a city where there was a herd of 50 deer walking down their main street. Can you imagine your main street of your town with 50 head of deer? Oh my goodness. So nature abhors a vacuum. We've created one. They're going in. So, but remember that. And here's the thing. This one's huge. If you've got a big work from home contingent, what is your contingency plan for when technology fails? Because it will fail, and it will fail at the worst possible moment. The internet will go down, your Wi-Fi will crash, your Zoom meeting won't work, or heaven forbid, like last night, trying to watch The Crown on Netflix, and Netflix wouldn't cycle through. I think there was far too many people in my neighborhood on Netflix. Not that that was critical, but nonetheless, it was frustrating. What's your backup? Have a contingency plan, because it will fail. So prepare yourself for that. Try to reduce the unknowns. I know that's very difficult, but people are going to have a lot of unknowns. Sorry about that. And ensure everybody knows that you're working hard to get the answers as quickly as you possibly can. I think it's a great opportunity as well to tailor the work. We talk about the ability for individuals to craft their own jobs. It's a great technique that people leverage their strengths and their weaknesses don't bring them down. That's a great opportunity. Some of us may be starting to do with more with less. Some of us are working from home. We may have children at home. Certainly some of our team here have children working from home that are crawling on their laps as you're trying to do a meeting with them through a video linkaging channel, video conferencing channel. Terribly distracting. Sure, we're doing more with less. That's okay. Tailor the tasks, fit the task to employee strengths. Ask them to help them define what it is they can be working on. Leverage the strength of your employees. The couple of closing comments is, one of the things, going back to focusing on what you can control or thinking about the things you can control. Control is so incredibly important to humans. It's one of the principles of our career transition practice, and that is when we are working with somebody who has maybe just received the news that their employment has been terminated. One of the very first things that all of our coaches pivot towards is giving them back a sense of control. What are some of the things they can control? What do you want to do next? How do you want to communicate that news? Control is so intrinsically powerful to human beings. It's a little thing called agency. An agency is the capacity for individuals to act independently and to make their own choices, and it's so incredibly important. This is why we saw the run on hand sanitizer. This is why we, at the early outset of this, because this was a way that people could have a sense of control about this. I'm still not sure about the toilet paper thing, but I think, again, that was probably a sense of agency. This is something that I can't control. This is something that I can do, even though the medical experts were not saying, hey, run out and get a bunch of toilet paper. It was something that we did, so it did make a lot of sense to a lot of us, but nonetheless, it was all about control. So give employees control. Let them, this is not a time for micromanagers to rear their ugly heads. This is not a time for micromanagement to take hold. Give them that sense of control. Give them that sense of agency. They're looking for it, they want it, but at the same time, provide the leadership that they need. And of course, empathy. Empathy is the bottom line to leadership in my books. Empathy is about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. What's the stress? What's the confusion? What's the fear that they're feeling? And walking a mile in their shoes and being empathetic. Empathy goes a long way. It wins the hearts and minds of all of your employees. So that would be sort of my last checklist item. Well, except I do have one more. And this one I thought was pretty cool. I read this the other day. Get some sunlight whenever you can, because sunlight produces serotonin. And serotonin, of course, lowers our blood pressure and cortisol, the stress hormone. So going for that walk outside or opening up the blinds and letting the sun shine in. Well, I sense a song coming on, but I won't do that. Sunlight's an amazingly powerful energy source on so many levels, but for us personally, it's really, really helpful. So I'm a big advocate of get outside if you can, take that 15-minute walk, socially distancing, but get some sunlight if you have it. Sadly for us in the far northern hemisphere, that's hard to come by at this time of year as we move into April showers, but nonetheless, every bit a little bit helps. So, keep calm and wash your hands, and keep calm and keep your physical distance. That's what we have for you for today. So timing looks okay, Chris, I think, to grab some questions.
Yeah, let's open her up. So guys,
Yeah.
feel free to type questions into the chat or the Q&A panel. So Terry, to kick us off, this was reiterated a few times throughout the chat, but a lot of people were looking for ways to help keep their teams positive. Now, a few of the suggestions were start each meeting with a positive note from each team member.
Love that. Yes, absolutely.
Spread some good news at the start of your meetings. What other ways can we keep our team positive throughout this?
Yeah, I love those ideas of spreading the positive news. As always, I'm always a big fan of celebrate every success, no matter how big or how small it is. And there are successes out there. For example, the mere fact that many of us have taken, many of our teams have migrated to working from home, as an example. Some of us are taking that for granted. That's a big change. Let's celebrate the fact that we've been able to do that in a short period of time. It's not like we said, okay, in 3 weeks time, we're going to move to working from home and we're going to buy all this equipment and get everything teed up and everything. We did it in record time. We did it with, it's almost like, to steal a quote, we MacGyvered it a lot of the time. I'd be celebrating that if you haven't done that already. That's a phenomenally huge deal. I think we also, probably because of my upbringing, my mother was a nurse. I think we need to celebrate the tremendously powerful work that all of our first responders and healthcare people are doing. Yes, there are some tragic outcomes of this, but there's also some amazing recoveries from this, and that's because of our frontline people. I'd celebrate that. Let's focus on that. It has a bit of negativity to it, but the positiveness of this, I think, could be pretty powerful. Celebrate the wins that you're having in the business right now. This is a time for many of us, we're going to say, you know what? We've been crying for the opportunity to maybe do a little bit of maintenance work on the pier. I come from the east coast of Canada, which is a part of the world where there's a lot of emphasis on the water and fishing and whatnot. And so we have a saying that when you're waiting for your ship to come in, what a great opportunity to do some maintenance work on the pier. This may be the time to knock off some of those projects that have been sitting there on the to-do list but could never get moved up the priority list. Celebrate that. Celebrate those kinds of things. I'm sure there's others with other better ideas out there on this call today, but those are some of the things that come to my immediate mind.
That's great. So one of the other questions that came up is, with such rapid changes and changing priorities so quickly, how can we keep our team stable and focused?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to that communicate often, communicate early and often, and be transparent. I know that with what we're trying to do here at our firm is to be able to provide as much information as we can that we know, and then to be perfectly honest when we don't know that information. And the interesting opportunity, I think, it presents itself. If we look at Lencioni's 5 Temptations of a Leader, You know, one of the ones they talk about is trust, and trust is based on showing your vulnerabilities. I think it's okay to show the vulnerability that you don't know everything as a leader. That, you know, one of the opportunities that presents itself here is to say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. What do you folks think? What do you folks know? What, hey team, let's share some ideas and whatnot. I think that um, it does a couple things. One is it addresses the issue of potentially rapid change and not knowing, but also, and this is so huge, this is such an important opportunity, is it keeps people engaged. My biggest fear of this whole pandemic is we've spent the last several years really changing the focus and moving that needle to the importance of employee engagement. And I would hate for this to be lost based on a pandemic where we forget that engagement of our employees is so important. Bring them into the decision-making process, bring them into the information sharing process. Communication works two ways, not just one way. Get their insights into that. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to deal with the issue of continuous rapid change, but I think what it can do for us is it keeps people engaged, which I think is so incredibly important, more so than ever before. I'm not sure it answers the question, but it's where my brain went.
It's helpful either way. So the next question that's coming through is, and I'll paraphrase here, this organization, they are on a mandated shutdown as a non-essential service.
Yeah.
So with the employees in that type of position, how can we keep them informed and positive?
Yeah, so interesting. And I'm not sure exactly what the industry is, but I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday that works in a manufacturing facility, and they are in a mandated shutdown, non-essential. So they're, you know, they make car parts, and they're shut down. And he was, you know, saying, not sure how to connect with people. They're not working from home, so it's sort of akin to vacation time. Um, I'm not sure if this particular industry is one that normally has shutdowns. I know that the person I was talking to yesterday, they do throughout the year, and usually maintenance and whatnot. But again, we started doing some brainstorming around email blasts, bulletin boards, electronic bulletin boards. They had a system inside their organization where they shared HR information. So leveraging their HR information system to be blasting out information to employees. But to be perfectly honest, when people are on a shutdown or a mandated shutdown and they are not necessarily working per se, it becomes a lot more difficult. I would argue in this situation that a communication on a daily basis somehow, which obviously in this world we're in right now would be electronic, is critical. But the snag to that, and I know exactly what my friend I was talking to yesterday would say, and perhaps the person who asked the question on this particular webinar, we may not have a line of sight to everybody electronically, and that could be difficult. I suspect that might be an opportunity for some of your human resources or leadership folks to maybe try to gather some information, but short of that, I'm out, to be honest. So.
All right, that seems to cover the bulk of the questions that have come through. So Terry, very thorough. So first of all, Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to flip just one more slide forward.
Yes, sir. There we go. Yep.
Thank you. So everybody on the call, thank you so much for taking the time and spending your time here with us. If you'd like more information, visit cpiworld.com. We also have a new free resource for anybody who's been offset due to COVID, who's seen their hours or their employment impacted. So take a look at that or share it with whoever could use that resource. Also go to aria.ca. That is Aria's site as well. A lot of great information coming out from the team up there. Stay safe, everybody. Once again, Terry, thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for listening today. I appreciate that, and hopefully there's some good insights that were shared and some good comments and chats. We'll obviously do some wrap up and be sending some stuff out, Chris. So to reiterate what Chris said, stay safe out there. We will get through this. We've got this. So let's go get them.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.